Now I'd like to introduce Renee Holland, Area Extension Agent with the University of Georgia, who will be presenting using unmanned aerial systems for disease detection, spot spraying, and other applications. Renee received her BS from Clemson University in microbiology. She then worked with the Global Microbiology Department at Procter & Gamble in Mason, Ohio, leading efforts in the Innovation Lab and focusing on technology reapplication and microbiological methods in the consumer products industry. Renee then decided to further her education and pursue a MS in plant pathology, focusing on bacterial leaf scorch disease in blueberry at the University of Georgia. Presently, she serves as your area extension agent for commercial blueberry production and is wrapping up her doctoral degree in plant pathology at UGA, which focuses on both food safety of mechanical harvesters and novel investigations into stem blight disease in relation to hedging and horticultural defects in blueberry. So, as I give you Renee.
Thank you, Dr. Rains. It's an honor to get to speak with you today. So thank you for the invitation to present at Precision Ag Conference. Firstly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about blueberries in Georgia and what the industry looks like. We have two types, Southern High Bush and Rabbit Eye blueberries. The Southern High Bush are more early blooming and ripening, they reach more of an earlier market window. Rabbit Eye blueberries bloom later and ripen later, and they are more of a native species to South Georgia. They are a perennial crop, so we don't have the luxury of replanting every year like the annual crops do. They're a woody shrub, and they produce the indigo-colored berries that we all like for their health benefits and taste. They're members of the Ericaceae family, and that's important to note because these plants do well in acidic, infertile soil, which is something that we are well acquainted with in Southeast Georgia. A little background about the Georgia blueberry industry. Again, I wanted to just show you with the map here on the right where this is concentrated. The commercial production is in this southeastern corner of Georgia, and expanding a little bit more westward in the south there. We've also had a lot of U-pick farms pop up, and with the whole agritourism movement, we've got more and more blueberry farms popping up in North Georgia as well. So it's located throughout the state, but highly concentrated in South Georgia. We operate in fresh and frozen markets, and one of our better years was back in 2014 when we had 92 million pounds. 52 million pounds of that went fresh, and 40 million pounds went processed. So we are active in both markets. And again, we produce the Rabbit Eye and Southern High Bush blueberry varieties. And it's very critical, this particular commodity, to our state because the estimated production value is well over $300 million. A little bit of review for the growers. A lot of you growers have participated in our local field days on this topic, but I just wanted to kind of go over this briefly. What is UAS? It's Unmanned Aerial Systems. Basically, that means there's an unmanned aircraft, and this also refers to the equipment to control it remotely. There are multiple options in this area. There are the quadcopters, which a lot of people are familiar with. A lot of consumers can purchase these online. You see pictured here on the left, this is a smart drone that we bought recently for the Blueberry Research Farm, and it has some spraying capability, just a 5-liter tank on it. But the quadcopter is one that's being frequently used by people to take a look at aerial images, and so that's one we will talk about quite a bit today. Another one is the rotary wing unmanned aerial vehicle that's pictured here in the middle. And this is actually the GT Buzz, which is part of Georgia Tech, their unmanned aerial vehicle program. And I think for blueberry production, that's definitely where we want to head in terms of being able to equip the drone with larger tanks and more spray nozzles, etc., to do more specific spot spraying in blueberries. And then featured in the photo on the far right, we have a photo of an autonomous electric plane. There's a company actually out of California called Pica, and we don't have a lot of this type of business occurring here in Georgia yet, but in California they're already starting to use the autonomous electric plane for spraying wine grapes in terracing type uneven terrain environments. So I know the question on all the growers' minds are, how much is this going to cost me, Renee? So firstly, just to give you an idea, the cost is usually around $7 to $12 per acre. Not bad at all. If you do multiple shots throughout the season in terms of multiple flights and getting multiple images, and you're going to be working with that company regularly, you tend to get that lower rate per acre. If it's just a single shot, it may be higher cost per acre because that's just a one-time thing that you're doing with them. But they still have to do everything that they would do normally if they were going out multiple times. This cost also includes data processing, access to online portals to view the images and information, ability to add notes and comments while in the field with the app, etc. And I just want to quickly go through kind of a story here on what it might cost, what it might look like for a particular situation. So a grower may be thinking, my goodness, if I have a 300-acre farm and I do one scan at, say, $10 per acre, that's going to cost me $3,000. But really, I'm talking about looking at this as a strategy. That may still be economical for you and your situation and what you're trying to do. But you could also consider starting small. And if you already know that your field 1 has low yield, and say it's only a 25-acre field, that's only going to cost you $250. If that has a low yield around, say, maybe 5,000 pounds per acre of blueberry, and that comes down to about 4 pounds per plant of blueberry, if you have, say, 1,200 plants in the field, you multiply the 4 pounds of blueberries of that one plant by, say, $2, if you're getting $2 per pound for blueberries. Again, the price can range in blueberry production, of course. So that brings you to $8.26 per plant, or $9,994 per acre. Okay, so say that you have them scan the field, the 25-acre field. 1 acre in that field is identified as being particularly weak, and turns out it's low in phosphorus. That's severely affecting your fruit set. And so you mitigate that acre in that field and increase your yield by 1 pound of blueberries per plant. Ultimately, if you do the math, that puts you up to 5 pounds per plant, multiplied by, say you get $2 in price per pound for blueberry, that gets you to $10 per plant, or $12,414 per acre. So my question to you is, was it worth the original $250 to have this done? And I think we can all agree yes. I'm not saying that would be the case for every situation, but I think there's just some really low-hanging fruit, and I really want the growers to understand that these companies are out there and you can already start working with them and enjoying some of the benefits of this new perspective to looking at your field. Okay, so your other question might be, okay, well, why do I even need it? And so that's why I wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about the different applications. There are several applications. So one that we would definitely want to look at with blueberries is frost and freeze damage estimation and assessment. Basically, you can kind of get an assessment of what's happening in your field after a freeze, because we do have that color change in affected tissue from green or white, green tissue or white bloom to brown necrotic after a major freeze. So you can go ahead and get an idea of the damage impact and estimate the yield loss there. And so that really helps the grower out in being able to account for that. Also, you can get a thermal read on the field. They can take these thermal images, and I'm kind of thinking out loud here that you might could do that even the night of the freeze to get a read on what the temperatures actually were in different areas of your field, and kind of go from there to determine which areas most likely had the most frost damage, depending on the temperatures it got to, and then also how much area is that. Again, that's very helpful, useful information. And also, with the thermal scan, that can also indicate cooler areas of the field, so that can also help the grower, if he has his field scanned beforehand, to be able to make adjustments to his frost protection strategy, realizing that, oh wow, that one field has much cooler temperatures than I realized in that one area, so I'm going to need to use more water and put out more water in my overhead freeze protection. Another really useful application for this technology is better monitoring and have a better handle on the location of drip tubing malfunction, such as leaks and clogs. For example, if you have more water in an area, the temperature will be cooler. Less water, the temperature will be warmer. And leaks and clogs can be very costly, especially trying to catch these clogged emitters. I know that's something that growers are struggling with in particular, because you can have several clogged emitters and several drip tubing lines on quite a bit of acreage and not even realize it till the whole field is in decline. So that's not very efficient in terms of having to replant that field or having to take such a hit on yield loss just because you weren't aware of the emitters being clogged in that particular field or location. So this is a technology that can be very helpful for that. Disease detection, which is something I'm going to talk about more specifically today, root rot, Botryosphaeria stem blight, Exobasidium leaf and fruit spot disease. These all cause changes in the coloration of the plant canopy or coloration on the leaves, or have specific patterns of discoloration. The Exobasidium leaf and fruit spot disease one's an interesting one that I'm not going to talk about a lot today, but I did want to mention because it puts such an obvious white to green unripened area on the tissue of the blueberry. So that would, and then the rest of the blueberry is blue. So it's a very interesting one. You can spot that when it's green, the whole blueberry is green, and it may be white in coloration, and then as the fruit matures, only part of the fruit matures and is more blue, and the rest is more of that white-green coloration. So pretty drastic contrast. That's pretty interesting to maybe take a look at later. Pollination, there's also been articles out there about the drones going out to the field and distributing pollen. Spot spraying, again, that's something that we're interested in because, why? Because that will help us reduce our pesticide usage and our bottom line in terms of the economic bill. And then also that's a conservation strategy as well. Spraying in wet fields, this is something we really would like to have a good tool for in Georgia. And, you know, I've spoken with pilots that often will be called on quite heavily during times that we have very wet fields. We've either endured a lot of these hurricane rains, and if we put ground equipment in the field, it's really going to tear up the fields and the terrain there. So it is better to spray by air at those times. And in that case, the pilots are inundated. So it would be nice to have some other tools and technologies and options to be able to spray in the field during that time when it's so wet. Also consider areas of uneven terrain, and we've already kind of touched on that briefly with the wine grape country example. But of course, we're in Southeast Georgia. There are some areas that are lower in terms of getting closer to swampy areas, or even just really getting more pest management aerially closer to the tree lines, in which you have the luxury of doing that more so with a drone than other types of aircraft, for example. Efficient and easy identification of missing plants or dead plants in the field. I'm going to show you some images of that here briefly. Thermal applications, we already talked about that some, but you can also use that for detecting insect activity in the field and disease progression early. Optimize weak spots in the field, identifying drainage issues, that's very important. You want to be able to have a good feel for where the drainage issues are in your field, and if it's not a very obvious area, it may be something you can catch with the aerial scans and address more quickly. And then ultimately, of course, targeting scouting efforts, that would be a really big win for this too. So just starting with the first disease example here, I want to talk about root rot diseases. Thank you, Dr. Jonathan Oliver, for this slide. He's got some nice photos here and explains this disease more so. The Phytophthora root rot diseases, the problem with those diseases is that they produce those zoospores that spread through water. So it can really run down a row of blueberry plants quite quickly, especially if we're inundated with rain. And it's often first seen in poorly drained areas of the field, again, an area that could be mitigated And I just wanted to show you these photos here where you can clearly see the effect of phytophthora root rot. It can stunt the plant. Here's a healthy plant, healthy root system. These are much smaller. That definitely affects the biometrics of the plant, much smaller canopy. And then of course this nice color change in canopy discoloration here, where we have the reddening and yellowing of the tissue. So we had one project with Dr. Glenn Rains where we're just trying to get our feet wet with some of this on the research side of things. And we had a site where we knew that there was quite a bit of root rot disease. And as you can see here in this larger image here, you can identify areas right off the bat that are weaker in production here in terms of the canopy itself of the plant. And the next image I'm going to look at, because it just shows better contrast between the green plant tissue and the brown necrotic disease tissue, will be in the following image. But just a note, this is kind of an initial image. The drone height was at 100 feet. And you can actually GPS locations, and that could be fed into the drone so that the drone can go directly to those spots and spot spray. So root rot would be a good one to start with, because you can start in a small area where the disease is just wanting to start up and keep it retained to that area and treat that area versus waiting until it's really inundated a field. And then your costs and fungicide are really going to increase then. But this image shows a nice contrast here. You can see the green plant canopy and these blueberries, but you can see these skips. You can also see nice brown necrotic tissue from root rot affected plants. One thing you'll notice about the images, there's quite a bit of shading. So one tip for the growers would be to really schedule your drone flies around noon or as close to noon as possible, so you don't have this shade casted on your images. So that was a nice little kind of demonstration that we did with Dr. Glenn Rains, and we were able to get some county extension agents together. But we're just starting to, today's really more about teasing you with the ideas and the possibilities. We're just starting to get our feet wet with this area, no pun intended. Now I wanted to talk briefly about a couple of companies that growers can actually start working with if they want to. And a lot of you have already been exposed to these two companies through our local field days. AErobotics, they gave a talk back in the fall of 2019 regarding their capabilities. You can see the quadcopter there. But they have a nice mobile app that links with a portal, and you can even set up scouting routes within that portal. And I just want to show you a couple of images here. This is a large series of fields that were imaged that have different changes in soil types. And as you can see, that can even translate into the plant health. You can actually set make settings for your health ranges for, say, poor, moderate, and healthy tissue or severely affected tissue, and color code it and have a really good feel of how much acreage falls into those different categories. So that's a nice big overview there to be able to look at. And you can see on the left-hand side of the image here, you have a nice user-friendly interface. You can select which map, the drone map or the satellite image. You can look at a visual image, just a basic visual image of the field. You can look at one that shows you that health index. Another nice feature is that you can actually get count data. So you can have it set up where it actually recognizes each individual plant, which is very valuable to know, especially with growers when they're trying to think about, okay, how many plants are severely affected? Am I going to need to replant those? And of course, what is that going to cost me? I mean, yes, there's quite a bit in this initial field image here, but think if they had scanned this sooner and addressed this sooner. And then kind of going back to the other image actually as well, you'll notice in the lower left corner, you can even add a route for scouting and plan your scouting routes. That's a nice feature with AErobotics. You can zone things. You can have it broken down by the individual plants. And it's just quite detailed, very nice and clear detail from here. Another company, and this is not unmanned, this is actually a manned aircraft, but this kind of goes back to the whole thermal imagery, aerial images, and the different things we can see and do with them. And I just wanted to let the growers know while we were talking about this today that this is also another option out there as well. But you can see here on the image here that this is a map of an area, and it shows the thermal readings. And in this case, it actually showed where the cattle were grazing and causing compaction issues. So that's very useful information to the growers. And you can actually even go in and click on different areas, and it'll give you the actual temperature readings. Very good detailed information. Something that, in terms of blueberry growers, our imaginations could definitely run wild with the possibilities. So some work I did with this company back in 2017, again, just some initial look at some things just to get our feet wet. This is Botrytis stem blight disease, and the main thing I wanted you to see on this slide is that the plant canopy is typically green, but with this disease, we have this very obvious blighting, and you can have a whole limb or series of limbs in the plant canopy of the blueberry plant, and it'll start off turning brown at the tips, and then eventually the whole cane will become blighted. So there's a pretty drastic color change there. It would be neat to catch this early with this type of technology. And I just kind of wanted to share with the group and this is a little bit more on the research side, but just showing how we're going to ground truth these types of things. It's nice to have the images from the air, but we still need to ground truth it and really verify that, yes, the disease we could see from the visual in the sky is also there on the ground, and just make sure everything lines up. There's going to be quite a bit of timing in terms of lots of work that needs to be done in terms of validating different diseases, different situations, and making sure everything lines up. But this is just an example of a schematic of how you could do a ground truthing assessment. The X's represent a plant, and I kind of just came up with this on the fly. The dots represent symptomatic tissue, and so I actually hand did this on a piece of paper while I was out in the field. But the X serves as if you're viewing down on the plant from the sky. So you're looking downward on the top of that plant canopy. And you need to know from the ground truthing perspective which side of the canopy is being affected by the disease, and make sure that that lines up with your aerial images. And so it also makes some little side notes too. The first plant you can see up top is at the end of this particular row, which I'm going to show you some other images in a moment here. And the plant was dead. The next plant had some different severity levels of affected branches. But if you go on down there to the end, you notice I put severe blighted, severe blighted. The tissue was severely blighted, and you can even see that in these images. So here you can actually, and it takes some tweaking with the speed of the plane and such, and actually I have heard that even since 2017, they're just way ahead again in the cameras and what they can do now. But you can even see here, this gray area is a dead plant, two nice live healthy plants, some bare ground, that white sandy ground there. And then if you go down to that seventh plant, you can even see, bam, brown tissue right there. Green canopy, brown tissue right there. Just from the basic, if you just had a basic visual view of your field from the air. And then it's just nice to see the thermal and how it lines up, and you can really start trying to solve some problems and investigating some issues in different fields. Here, it looks like this half of the field is cooler. So that darker black and the blue, that means the temperature is cooler. And then this area of the field, the temperature is much hotter. And of course, we have the airport runway here. This is at the Blueberry Research Farm. I should have mentioned that. In Alma, Georgia, which a lot of you growers are familiar with, which is right there near the airstrip there. And, at first you may think, I wonder if we have two different soil types. So an interesting thing to look at is you can take a look, you can do a web soil survey on your field site, or get with your local NRCS representative to take a look at that. I'm trying to bring my mouse up here. Anyways, the image on the right is the soil survey, and you can verify if that is the case or not. And actually, in this case, it's all rigged in sand. So the temperature differences are not due to the, soil type is not having an impact there. So that kind of helps you narrow down in your process of elimination. Scouts, consultants, when you're really troubleshooting things in the field, this is good information to have. And then just lastly, they have this ADVI image, which is their Advanced Digital Vegetative Index image, and they have it aligned with the different colors will relate to good plant health versus poor plant health. And I'm trying to get my mouse to work here. Okay. So this is the first row of blueberries, which is a short row, varietal row that they've had for many years here at this Star field site. This is Southern High-Bush blueberry, I should have mentioned that, and it's the variety Star. But remember that gray plant I mentioned that's dead? You can see, of course, it's got a lot of coloration on the poor side. And then we have two healthy plants. We have that bare ground, which is the different color there. And then you can see the plants again. So it's just really nice. You can see this at an individual plant level. And let me get my mouse back here. But where we have a lot of that, the issues with the severely blighted canes, you can see a lot of that yellow and red color coming up on the ADVI image. So it's just a nice, it's another perspective, growers. It's another perspective. And the scouts, and I'm sure you yourself are not walking up and down every single row of all the acreage you have, but we need to find more cost savings. So spot spraying would definitely help with that. We also need to find more efficiencies to scout and look at our fields and identify issues and potential problems early and go ahead and get them addressed. So I just wanted to share that information with you today. But we look forward to more research in this area in the future.